Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is Yukitsu Times. Welcome to my channel, welcome to more Total War Warhammer as we continue along with our tournament. In this one we got the Internet Janitor as the Empire versus Dr. Crime as the Orcs. And you might notice that this is starting off in Glacial Lake. That's because these players forgot to send in some of the videos, forgot to record them, and once those recordings aren't there, very hard to recover. So for the Internet Janitor, we've got Karl Franz. He will be on the Griffin. We've got 5 units of Spearmen with shields. We've got the 2 units of Great Swords, 2 units of Crossbowmen, 4 units of Outriders with grenade launchers, and the Steam Tank. That's always interesting to watch. They're up against Dr. Crime's Greenskins over here. They've got Azag the Slaughterer, Goblin Big Boss, Goblins, 5 units of Orc Boys, a unit of Black Orcs, 4 units of Arrow Boys, the Goblin Wolf Riders, 2 units of Savage Orc Biggins, or what the hell are these? Savage Orc Boar Boys, not the big uns, just the regular ones. They've got the Arachnarok Spider, which is always a good add to have. They got these Goblin Wolf Riders over here. So they've also got some Trolls, which is, a little bit odd against the Empire, but they're going to do quite well in this particular battle. This is one that I have actually seen before I've done this because I botched one of my recordings. Anyway, we've got the Empire over here. Not exactly in the corner. They've got plenty of room behind them that the Orcs can use to get around. And so we're going to see some shooting starting off with the Steam Tank over here. I did have a rule in place, only 2 units of the Outriders or any sort of skirmishing cavalry in play, so it's a little bit, but it's not going to matter too much in the end, so I'm not going to be too fussy about that fact right now. Now we have got the Arachnarok Spider coming under fire from that Steam Tank, and that's a very, very good target. That high damage, armor-piercing shot from that Steam Tank with the high rate of fire is going to deal a good amount of damage. Now, a regular cannon does have more damage, especially for cost, than a Steam Tank, just because you've got like 3 of them for every one of the shots from the Steam Tank. But the damage per second from the individual Steam Tank, much more than the individual fire from the 3 units, or than each of the 3 cannons. We're seeing the engagement coming from the Orcs from this one side. They're not sending any flankers around the other side of this little lake here, or this pit, whatever. I don't really know what this is. It's weird that this is called Glacial Lake when this clearly is not actually underwater, so I don't know. Either way, the Outriders coming in, they're going to try and slip through the gap here and pummel these Orc Boys with those grenades of theirs. And this is a unit that I haven't really figured out a best use for, per se. Like, I don't actually know what I would ever use the Outriders with grenade launchers exactly for. But here you're going to see some good shots from them, dealing a good amount of damage. These Orc units have clumped together, making it much more devastating. You can see a lot of damage coming down from that, but the question is that a good cost-effective investment? 3,200 points to sort of bully units that are worth only 450? I don't really know. The ammunition count on these guys is quite high, so if left to do their thing for an entire match, they could certainly do a lot of damage. The Arachnarok Spider is still getting picked at, taking quite a bit of damage from the total number of hits it's taken. Orc Boys, though, going to be getting into combat here, and they're a good counter to Spearmen with shields, which are not fantastic against units like Orc Boys. Some of these guys getting dropped, though, by the crossbows that are starting to fire here. We're seeing these Spearmen with shields shuffling to the back line to help defend against this cavalry surge, but that does mean that they're going to have to move forward the Great Swords, who do eat a charge from those Trolls. It's a very solid charge. We're seeing that the Arachnarok Spider coming in as well. It's unfortunately going off to veer into those Spearmen over there. It's a little bit of an odd choice. It's still getting fired at. Lots and lots of sort of Orc units sort of sitting back here, waiting for a better engagement, I suppose. Azag the Slaughterer sort of doddering around in the back there, not doing too much. We're seeing that this Arachnarok Spider, I suspect, is trying to get into these Spearmen with shields over here, and just cannonballs whizzing past. I'm not really 100% sure what these Spearmen shields looks like. They're trying to chase down this cavalry. It's not going to end well for them. They're going to end up getting engaged into this unit of goblins over here, which are going to be perfectly fine at tying them up. Arachnarok Spider back here is just soloing a unit of Spearmen shields, and while the Spearmen shields are counter versus large, they're not counter versus armor. You're going to have a very tough time with this Arachnarok Spider, and you can see that the sheer quality of it is taking these guys apart, absolutely. Back here, you've got Azag using his Spirit Leech against Karl Franz. It's going to be dealing a little bit of damage there. We're seeing some grenade shots coming into the middle of these Orc Boys here. But more and more Orc Boys. We see these first Great Swords breaking the fight here. Still have these Black Orcs unengaged, not fighting anything in particular. They could be going in against those Great Swords over here. Finally see a gap for the Savage Orc Boar Boys with these Spearmen so far out of position. I mean, the Ragnarok Spider clearing off one, another one still tied up by these spearmen with shields. The goblins are starting to move towards that gap as well, but now you've got these Savage Orc Boar Boys coming around the back here, trying to get into these Outriders, and that's going to cause a lot of havoc into the crossbowmen as well. It's going to stop them from firing as well. Got some Orc Boys from the front, starting to lose that engagement there, though. Ragnarok Spider coming in, shattering the front line of those spearmen with shields there, allowing these Orc Boys to surge into the fight as well, breaking on a whole ton of these Empire units. Blood Roar coming down, it's going to scare away some of these Orcish cavalry pretty soon, however. Not going to be enough, though. You still got the Orcs surging through the front line of the Empire. Only the Great Swords holding on here, and even then, they're not going to last that much longer. The Goblin Big Boss pushing his way into the front as well. Spider finally pushing his way into that steam tank for that climactic finale that we would always want to see. Another Spirit Leech coming down on Karl Franz, coming down to a very, very small amount of health on the Empire General, and if he starts fighting something like the Ragnarok Spider, he could very well be in trouble. Back into the air with him, trying to get himself out of the way of any sort of fight. He might come down for Azeg at some point soon. Goblins over here doing a decent job of tying down this unit of Spearmen. There's another unit of Spearmen that could be brought back into the fight, but I believe that the Internet Janitor is trying to keep his units microed a little bit on the side. Goblin Wolf Riders doing a fairly decent job of tying up these Outriders with grenade launchers. More of these cavalry coming back into the fight here, trying to get at these Outriders, stopping them from firing, stopping them from rallying. But a lot of these units rallying pretty soon at this point in time. The Empire General does charge into Azeg, gets himself killed. Do believe that there was another Spirit Leech, but I believe that he was actually finished off in melee combat. Orc Boys coming against these Spearmen with shields into their flank, stopping their charge. And at this point in time, the Empire basically is out of units that can really do a whole lot. The Steam Tank is taking a Spirit Leech, doing a good amount of damage to it as well from that Ragnarok Spider. The Ragnarok Spider being a very decent opponent to fight something like a Steam Tank. A lot of those Empire units that are sort of rallying are still kind of not in the fight here. Empire Greatswords, though, taking a bit of a charge. It's not really going to do a whole lot. A lot of these units too close to the table edge, and they sort of flee right off there, causing cascading morale effect there. Steam Tank just holding on to its last legs there, or its last treads. Trolls doing good damage to it when they're not getting knocked around by it too much. The Ragnarok Spider, of course, doing absolutely fantastically against it with its high armor-piercing damage. Azeg the Slaughterer even getting into this fight. And with the Ragnarok Spider in this fight, the Steam Tank can't even kite out of this combat very effectively because the Ragnarok Spider is just a little bit faster than the Steam Tank, allowing it to sort of bully it and blow it up there in a pretty decisive display of might for the Orcs. So that was our first round, going to Dr. Crime as the Orcs' decisive victory. Pretty interesting matchup there. What the Empire really needed to do is use those Outriders a little bit more effectively. I mean, if they had been right up there, getting those volleys off right from the start, they maybe then they could have really turned that around, done something different. If those Orc Boys hadn't been able to do quite so much, that would have been quite a good way of doing things. Dr. Crime, Fight 3, this is the same one. Again, these guys did not send me in Game 1 or 4. Got the Internet Janitor as the Orcs over here, and Dr. Crime as the Vampire Counts. Now, the Orcs have taken a slightly peculiar approach here. They've taken the Azeg the Slaughterer, 2 units of Savage Orc, 4 Savage Orc Biggins, 2 units of Spider Rider Archers, 2 Giants, 2 Doom Divers against the Vampire Counts. Taken a Master Necromancer, the Vampiress. They've taken Zombies, 3 units of Skeletons, 2 Skeleton Spearmen, 3 units of Karen Wraiths, 2 units of Black Knights. They've got the Terrorgeist, which is a peculiar thing to see. I believe they've also got 2 units of Felbats, the unit of Vargeists up there. And they had, I believe, something else. Or was it just 3 Black Knights? It might have just been 3 Black Knights, actually. So that should be everything mentioned. Looks like it. So the reason that this is a little bit peculiar is I'm not 100% sure what the Doom Diver catapults would really be good for here, but the fact that he's using the Savage Orcs rather than the regular Orcs is also just a little bit odd, because you do tend to see magical attacks coming out of the Vampire Counts, giving them a good counter against that 20% damage reduction. And you don't tend to see too much armor piercing coming out of the from the undead, other than the form of the Karen race, who have those magic attacks. So against them personally, I think the Orc Biggins are just a little bit more effective, because the Orc Biggins are also going to be able to chew through the Skeletons much more safely and much more effectively, but it comes down to a bit of a matter of preference. Here we can see the Doom Divers are firing away. They're just hitting Skeleton Warriors, and even if they're capable of racking up a large number of kills, it's not going to do a tremendous amount here. The Black Knights over on this side managed to get hit by the Fate of Bajuna, taking them down quite a lot. The Terrorgeist shies away from the General, not wanting to engage him. Not 100% sure why. The air wing of the vampire counts could very easily take out Azag the Slaughterer at this point in time. And this is going to be tough for the orcs to sort of win this fight, just because they are going to get surrounded by that mobility so easily. Savage orcs in very, very deep lines as well, when they require those charges, those good charges are very, very important for them. Look at that charge bonus, 25. It's actually going to be a little bit higher because of Frenzy, although that might already be taken into account there, actually. The big uns on the right there, yeah, they've got 31. Seeing some shots from these Goblin Spider Rider archers, they're not going to do a huge amount, and this is where sort of things go really wrong for the Savage Orcs. They don't actually get a charge off. They're getting outflanked, and what is being paid attention to is over possibly on the right. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that these Force Goblin Spider Rider archers were taking a little bit too much attention away over here, and you tend to see like a lot of these Savage Orcs getting charged without being able to charge back, which is disastrous for them. Doomdiver is unprotected. We got Azag being surrounded by Fellbats. It's not really actually that big a deal. Does manage to pop a Spirit Leech onto the Terrorgeist, which is going to cause it some good damage. These Black Knights over here getting taken down by the big uns pretty effectively. The Giants over here are capable of just mashing through these skeletons, but they're not going to be enough to defeat this entire army on their own. They're going to definitely need the backing of this army, and this army is getting caught really poorly out of position. Vampire putting a Spirit Leech onto Azag the Slaughterer. We've got Karen Wraiths coming around the back, and they're finally going to start reinforcing these units of Black Knights and this Terrorgeist. Got Azag the Slaughterer just charging into melee combat here. Help finish off these Black Knights really quickly, and also to get him into the support of these Savage Orcs so that he's not soloing all of those area units, and those area units following him in get dragged into the fight, start taking horrendous damage against these large Savage Orc biggins. But Azag at about half health here. Got Black Knights coming around the back here. We've got some Savage Orcs fighting the good fight against these Karen Wraiths, against several other units. Fated Bajuna coming down on the Karen Wraiths, and that's exactly the target that I think should be targeted with Fated Bajuna. Got another unit of Savage Orcs breaking here against these Karen Wraiths and against these Skeleton Spearmen. Giant sort of rambling his way into these units of, what are these, zombies? Zombies, yeah. It's a very, very poor choice for him because he's going to be bogged down by a unit that really is not that crucial to this fight. Going to probably see another Spirit Leech put down on Azag the Slaughterer. That is indeed what we see. He's popping the rest of those Fellbats, but that's not going to matter too much. His health is getting catastrophically low, and we've got 2 units of Black Knights able to threaten the flanks of these Savage Orc biggins at this point in time, as well as contribute to the fight of these Karen Wraiths that are still in the fight here. Gonna need more Spirit Leeches or Fate of Bajuna from Azag before he goes down. They've still got 19 magic. Wounds of magic are still strong for them. And one of the giants, I believe, is starting to get quite low here. The other giant fighting the zombies is not taking any damage at all, really. But this giant here, doing a very, very sort of poor job of fighting at the Karen Wraiths. He does need some support there. He does need those Karen Wraiths to be a little bit off their guard. But as it is, they're just taking a big beating there. Another unit of Karen Wraiths getting hit by the Fate of Bajuna. It's going to knock them out of the fight, pretty much. Terrorgeist over here lasting a very, very long time against these Savage Orcs. The Savage Orcs usually do a very good job of killing them quite quickly. I do believe that Azag is on extremely low health. He's pretty much 1 Spirit Leech away. At this point in time, like we see some rallying from these Savage Orcs, but the giant over here, isolated and alone, is going to probably fall pretty soon. We got Manfred von Karstein running into the fight there. The giant now, if he was being assisted by this other giant over here, could potentially kill Manfred von Karstein relatively quickly. We see the Savage Orcs, though, charging into the Skeleton Spearmen, more Skeletons charging into the fray against these Savage Orc biggins, who are doing a good job. These Black Knights are getting completely wrecked here. Azag the Slaughterer managing to kill the Terrorgeist before he goes down to the Vargeists. Yeah, and without the General, the Orcs are going to be in some significant trouble. You're going to see that these Savage Orc biggins trying to hold down this fight here, doing a good job of taking apart these Black Knights, get charging back by these Terrorgeists, or by these Vargeists, and that's going to be a huge morale shock to them. With the General being dead, that's going to cause them 2 of the units to rout immediately, one of them to be on very low morale. It's now shaken. It's going to be quite bad for it. This Giant's still doing nothing. He needs to get into the fight there. This other Giant routing out of the fight. These Savage Orcs now running. This is pretty much the entire Orc army, and this is going to be basically the beginning of the end for these guys. Giants have got a fairly respectable amount of morale, but it doesn't really matter so much when they're not being utilized in the fight to the best of their abilities. Here they come into the back of these Skeleton Spearmen. Skeleton Spearmen are actually pretty decent against a Giant, but I mean, it still does take them a very long time to kill one. Here you can see him just battering around these Vargeist, getting surrounded by all these different units, and even surrounded, a giant is going to cause a lot of damage. They're very, very deadly. Still, this is going to be far too much for him to deal with. You can see his morale kind of already a bit low. That breath attack not doing too much damage against units like these Vargeist or these Black Knights over here. Got some Savage Orcs back into the fight, but they're not going to be able to make it back to this giant in time to really assist him. This giant is coming back into the fight as well, but again, too slow. We're going to see another Spirit Leech going down onto this giant, and that is essentially going to finish off the last little bit of this guy's morale. It's already quite bad, and with that little bit more damage from that general, it's going to just really take it down. It's considered losing the combat here. Vargeist basically getting swatted around, but again, not going to be quite enough. And that should be the end of this. Yeah, there we go. With the giant routing, that's enough of the balance of power that the orcs, remaining Savage Orcs, just completely run off there. So that's going to be a victory for Dr. Crime there. And we go into our last of the matches that were recorded by these guys. This actually does go to round 5, so we'll see who wins the ultimate matchup between them. Got Dr. Crime as the dwarves with Thorgrim Grudgebearer. Thane, 4 units of warriors, unit of warriors with great weapons, 5 units of longbeards, 3 units of quarrelers, a catapult, a grudge thrower rather, 2 units of brimstone gyrocopters versus Chaos over here. We've got Sigvald the Magnificent Marauders with great weapons, 2 units of the throwing axes, 6 units of Chaos Spawn, which is a very peculiar choice, and 2 giants. Now this is not a setup that I particularly think I would take against dwarves. It could be very effective against someone like Undead perhaps, but I think that dwarves are just such a strong counter army against a lot of the units that the Chaos player has taken here. So I definitely think that the dwarves have got an advantage here. Now the dwarves are not in the corner, so what they're doing is perfectly fine. They have decided that they're going to take the engagement on a hill. They start moving upwards, and Chaos, seeing this, responds essentially by moving up onto their own hill. Now the Brimstone Gyrocopters can be warded away by these Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes, but I mean, they're going to be an interesting unit in this particular fight just because they're capable of dealing really quite good damage to Sigvald without him being able to retaliate all that easily or effectively. So those Marauder Horsemen basically have to devote their entire lives to screening away those Gyrocopters. Now, Gyrocopters can be taken down very easily by Fire Wizards. I think that a Pyro Wizard firing a Fireball at them is actually one of the easiest ways to take out a Gyrocopter. Overcast basically automatically destroys 1 Gyrocopter from the unit, so if you want to risk it, you could also just fire a regular shot from a Fire Wizard, and it's likely to cause a kill on a Gyrocopter, but it's not a guaranteed thing, and Overcast is pretty much guaranteed. So the reason I don't like these Chaos Spawn is that they've got low armor, making them very, very squishy and easy to kill for things like the Quarrelers, which most Dwarf players do take because they're an excellent source of damage. The Giants, similarly, are one of those units that goes down very, very quickly to Quarrelers. Now, the Giants I still think are okay if you can force the Dwarves to fire at a different target, because the Giants are still going to have a good time punching through Dwarven armor. The same cannot be said for the Chaos Spawn, which lose a ton of their damage to Dwarven armor. So they're going to have a hard time cracking through that. They're going to have a hard time dealing persistent damage. Here we see some bombs being dropped on these Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes, and that does knock out 5 of them. But these Gyrocopters are taking some shots in return. They're dropping another bomb down on these Chaos Spawn. Not going to be all that damaging. They're going to have to definitely want to try and drop them on the Marauder Horsemen if they can, but that's not what we see them being used on here. So, not the most damaging or effective of bombing runs, and they take quite a lot of damage from those throwing axes in return. Throwing axes are sort of kept nearby, and you're going to see them picking away and dealing good damage to these Gyrocopters. Now, it doesn't matter how high up they get, they can still get axes thrown at them. You're going to see axes being thrown up at them here, axes sticking into the hitbox even though that there's nothing actually there. So those guys are getting knocked around by those axes, and you're actually going to see one of these Gyrocopters going down from the repeated hits. They are still dealing some good damage themselves, but they definitely want to get out of there. These Marauder Horsemen are dealing some good damage to them. Dwarves still moving their units up to the top of this hill. I have no problem with units hill camping so long as that's not in the corner. At this point in time, one of those Gyrocopters does go down. The Marauder Horsemen, even if they're sort of even if they lose, this is pretty cost-effective for them because it's the only way for them to take those units off the field. They're a little bit cheaper than the Gyrocopters, and those Gyrocopters, if you kill 2 of them, the remaining one just does nothing. There's nothing really, no point even having it. And at this point in time, the Chaos player really probably should be assuming that the Dwarf player is going to take that high ground on that top of that hill. And if he gets it, it's going to be very, very hard for him to sort of unentrench those Dwarves from that position there. Taking the Quarreler shots as he's charging up there is going to be really bad for him. At this point in time, Marauders have decided to start chasing the gyrocopters with the brimstone guns all the way around the map, and this is going to be just a merry chase for them, and frankly that's going to be okay. Keeping them out of the fight is going to be a relatively wise decision, but these Marauder Horsemen with the throwing axes are one of the few sources of armor-piercing damage for the Chaos Forces here. Now, normally I would chastise the Dwarves for not having enough armor-piercing himself, because typically Chaos does have a lot of armored units, but this is one of those rare cases where Chaos has gone full-on Monster Mash. Not going to be that necessary for him to have armor-piercing damage, because the only armored unit here is Sigvald, and you could just have the brimstone guns just right-clicked on him eventually, and that would deal considerable damage. It's interesting that they've chosen to fight this fight on this hill here. It would be possible for the forces of Chaos to sort of force the Dwarves to fight closer to the center swamps, but not necessarily that easy. We've got Dwarves issuing attack orders against these Chaos Spawn. I actually would have preferred to see them standing stationary. The Chaos Spawn have a decent charge bonus, although not amazing either. But the thing is, these Chaos Spawn, without their charge bonus, don't deal huge amounts of damage to armored units. That charge bonus is somewhat negated by Dwarven units, so they could have stood still and received a little bit less damage. And the charge bonus from the Dwarves themselves is really, really poor. Thorgrim is coming into the fight, but not actually going to engage. You're seeing shots from those Quarrelers coming into different units, primarily different units of Chaos Spawn. I disagree with this target priority. I think that they should be firing at the Giants first because they're the bigger threat. Yes, the Chaos Spawn are more numerous. Yes, you do want to kill them with Quarrelers, but you want to kill those Giants first because they deal more damage to those Dwarven units, and those Dwarven lines go down very, very fast against something like that. Thorgrim Grudgebearer could also be getting into the fight here against the Chaos Spawn. He doesn't do too well against Giants, so I wouldn't put him against those sorts of things. But we're seeing these Quarrelers firing away. I think that they finally started firing at the Giants here. Hard to tell exactly what their priority is, but you can see arrows at the very least hitting Giants, and that's going to be a quite decent target for them. Now, at this point in time, the Marauders are back in the fight. They're getting zoned out a little bit by the Dwarf Warriors, but they are going to come back around and start attacking Quarrelers. Quarrelers are turning to fire at them, and the Quarrelers are going to have an easy time seeing them off here. The Brimstone guns here, I'm not 100% sure what they're firing at. I do believe they were firing at the Giants, but it's a little bit hard to tell. Again, Dwarves getting thrown back and forth by these Giants. The Giants are just getting free reign here, but the Chaos forces are getting pushed back, and there's a lot of Dwarves for them to kill. Sigvald the Magnificent doing a fantastic job over here. I believe he's up to 37, 38 kills already, which is pretty good. He's usually not that great at chewing through armor. He's also usually not that great at chewing through individual targets, but he's doing a pretty decent job. He's now fighting a Thane. He'll have an easy time beating that. However, since the Thane is supported by 2 units of Dwarf Warriors, he could be in a little bit more trouble just because his attacks are getting divided. And you can see he's already taken a decent amount of damage, not a huge amount, but a decent amount. At this point in time, it's really going to be difficult for the Chaos Forces to fight. They've been encircled pretty badly, and yes, they are immune to psychology. They're completely unbreakable, in fact, with this large ball of Chaos Marauders, or Chaos Spawn here, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be invincible. Grudge Thrower finally starting to throw some rocks down into here. I don't think that there are any good targets for them. I think that they probably are causing a little bit of friendly fire casualties there as well, but still, it's probably good for them to be in position. These Chaos Marauders with great weapons are still in the fight, which is kind of funny to me because they've been just sort of... They're such a weak unit in general, but they're doing a decent enough job chopping through these Longbeards over here with the support from those Chaos Spawn. Finally, you see the end of a Dwarven unit, but those Dwarven units are still surrounding a lot of these Chaos Spawn over here. Chaos Marauders with great weapons over there, pretty much out of the fight. The Chaos Giants starting to lumber into a weird position here. They need to make sure that they're in the fight. They need to make sure they're fighting constantly. Dwarf Warriors over here have taken up that spot. Still fighting these Chaos Marauders with great weapons. They'll do pretty poorly against Chaos Marauders with great weapons. I do think Chaos Marauders with great weapons do beat Dwarf Warriors, but Sigvald over here is starting to get a little bit of damage on him, starting to deal a little bit of damage as well. We're starting to lose units of Chaos Spawn, and as they sort of go down in numbers, their effectiveness drops very, very dramatically. Thorgrim's starting to use some of his abilities there, moving in towards the Giants. I don't know if that's necessarily the best fight for him, But at this point in time, it really doesn't matter all that tremendously. Quarrelers, I don't think, are firing at anything right now. They need to be focused firing those giants. Would love to see them focus on firing those giants, because that is exactly what would kill those giants very, very quickly. They should be dead by now. Still see some shots coming in against something, but I think that actually might be brimstone guns firing over at these chaos spawn over here. Hard to tell for sure. Can you imagine if Chaos Spawn could regenerate their hit points? I think that that would just be hilarious. It would be exactly like facing off against those undead things, except 200 points more expensive. Giant over here, taking a lot of damage finally. I think those are grudge thrower shots as well as brimstone shots. Brimstones are not actually that effective against Chaos Giants just because their damage per shot is quite low. And most of it's armor piercing, so you know, you'd use it against a different unit ideally. Dwarf Warriors actually can also deal decent damage against Giants. It's just because the Giants are unarmored, obviously, but the thing is the Giant is obviously going to be dealing damage a lot faster. Alright, first Giant is routing, and in fact is shattered. And the last Giant is now shattered. We've just got this tiny unit of Chaos Spawn here that are trying to fight for their desperate lives, and they're not going to last too much longer either, because they're on extremely low hit points here. You got less than 1,000 for this one, less than 1,000 for this one, about less than 500 now, and that's going to get chopped through pretty quickly. I think Sigvald has routed as well, but I don't think he actually died in this fight. Maybe he did. Thorgrim Grudgebearer has taken a little bit of damage, knocking around those giants a bit, but nothing too severe. And at this point in time, it's just a matter of time before the last of these Chaos Spawn go down. There goes one. Look how grotesque they are. There goes another one. Thorgrim goes just charging past him with his gigantic book of grudges there. And yeah, Chaos Spawn is sort of like rampaging through their lines as best as he can, but down he goes finally. And that's going to be the victory for Dr. Crime, I believe. And I believe that must mean that he won the bracket. So, well played for everybody in the first round of our Something Awful tournament. I hope you found this one enjoyable, and of course, as always, I hope to see you all next time.